Hi, I'm Mike Chaco. Thank you for coming today. And thank you to everybody on Zoom for joining us. I have to admit, today was a little touch and go. We kept looking at the weather and wondering what's going to happen with the ice. And I know a few members called and said, well, as far as I know, we're going to make it. I kept paying attention to the weather report. I'm in Etobicoke and like all we got was rain. But I've talked to a few others. Certainly not ice, especially north of the city. So I thank you all for taking the time to come to today. We normally begin our meeting by asking if there's any new members, and I know we have a new member. So talking to Janet and thank Dawn for bringing her too. So Janet, how about you tell us a bit about yourself and why you're here today?
Okay, well, I met Dawn about 3 years ago at the York Fairbank Senior Center. And so I joined and was going to his different sewing classes. And as we had a lot of common interests. And one time I was over there at his house, and there in his hallway, he has this big phonograph sitting there and everything. So I asked him about it, and then he told me a bit of history about how he painted the horn and different things. I mean, he's had it since he was a kid or a teenager and stuff. So and I said, oh, and I really like it, and I know my dad has one. At least I'm hoping we still have it. So then he told me that he belonged to this, and one thing led to another and everything else. And I watched a few of your videos, and then I said, oh, I have to get one. I just moved, I downsized from a 2-story house into a bungalow recently because 2 years ago I lost my husband. And so I really would love to have something in my house as memorabilia and that thing, and a showpiece to be able to play records on them.
Well, you've come to the right place if you want to get a gramophone.
Thank you very much.
We have one or two. Thank you very much. Any other new members or guests? Would you like to talk about?
Yeah. Hi there, I'm Joan Montagnes, and I'm here because you all seem to be the people who are interested in antique phonographs, and I had one that I needed a good home for. So I've come to visit and learn all about you, and that is the phonograph which I brought with me, and it's my great grandfather sold it in Toronto. He was the Sonora dealer in Canada. And so it has family provenance, and then it turns out it went to one of your members, Don Woodrow, and then he sold it back to the family, to my grandfather, and I ended up with it. So there it is, and I'm so excited to find out that there's phonograph people out there, Canadian phonograph people.
Yes, thank you. And so later on, when we have the auction part, we could talk a bit more about the history of it, and we'll play it, whatever. And there's also a background of it too.
Yeah.
Great, always helps. And I know several people are probably interested in it, so thank you for coming today. Do we have anybody new on Zoom joining us? Any hands up? No? Okay. Again, thank you for coming too. Do we have any announcements today that anyone wants to make? Brian, you wanted to mention something about the name tag?
Yeah, so if you were here last week, you remember I mentioned name tags.
Last week.
Last meeting,
Okay.
last meeting, I wasn't here last week. No, I was, nobody else was. So no, the signups over there, if you didn't get to sign up on it, anybody on
Oh,
Zoom, if you're, you probably don't want one, but if there's anybody on Zoom that would normally be here and you haven't heard one, you can let me know. The price is $11.50, and if I could get payment up front, I will have them by next meeting in May. So it can be emailed to me. I'm in the thing, but grandmaphonedoctor@gmail.com. I also have needles if you want any today. Right now, soft is limited. Soft tone. I've got some medium and loud yet, but with the tariff war, I'm debating what I'm gonna update with my stock. I've crossed recently and got dinged. I've heard lots of stories of people getting dinged, so depending what I buy and claim and bring across, I don't wanna have to pay double the price for needles, so. But I do have some for here today. And anybody in Zoom, I'll mail them for $3, so 2 packs.
What, bag of
Uh,
$3?
I can mail about 5 packs for $3 postage. Loud are the heaviest, so they might end up being, but I can mail packs of 100 for about $3 postage.
Yeah, I'll buy some today, probably.
Brian, how much is the pack of needles?
$10. And then if you want them mailed, it's $3 for 4 or 5 packs, depending on that one.
Great, okay, thanks.
That's 100 in a pack.
100 in a pack.
100 a pack.
Yeah.
And so again, there's a piece of paper over there if you're interested in getting a name tag, which is always handy to have. And I thank you, Brian, for doing that. Any other announcements anybody wants to make? Coming up. No?
Well, I
Anybody
want
on-
something silly.
Tim, go ahead.
I learned that last Tuesday was National Brian Day, the
There
day
is such
for
a thing.
appreciating people named Brian.
Wow.
Wow.
I was a little late. I think I found out that about a week and a half later. I'm like, oh, I missed it, take your pick.
Well, mark it on your calendar for next year.
Yeah, I will, yeah.
With today's presentation, Alexander has done a great job setting up 2 presenters. We're gonna have Brian Nix and Steve Redmond talk about phonograph repairs. And we're gonna look at different aspects of it, so I know it's gonna be really good. And I'd like to point out that our next meeting is on May 4th. And that one, Don Coleman and Sasha Goldman are gonna be talking about 3D printing, to be another fascinating topic. And I really know nothing about 3D printing, but I've been talking to Don, I get little tidbits of what you can do with it, it just sounds amazing. So looking forward to that presentation. And that's about it for me, so we can begin the presentation now. Alex, did you want to introduce him? No? Okay, who was going to start first?
Brian, yeah.
Brian's gonna start first, and I thought it was best for the presentations if we hold our questions to the end, because I know sometimes like you're on a roll describing something and then people start asking questions that go in a different tangent, it's trying to get back on track. So if there's something you want to ask, we'll ask at the end, and it's probably a better way to cover it. So we're going to start with Brian, and you're going to talk about working on motors and the special tools that are required.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I don't know how you want to do your camera, but
No, you just do what you do at all.
yeah. All right, so I've got a motor here that I've got prepared to kind of disassemble and demonstrate, but I also have pictures of one that I worked on, a different motor, because obviously people in Zoom are not going to be able to see exactly what I'm doing here in the room. So first off, if we've got some pictures to show. But
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
It's just gonna take a second.
So they're pulling up some pictures, just a few pictures that I found on the internet that I've had, a lot of them I've had for a while, but. This is a general picture of a lot of the different Victrola motors, the common ones that you can find. Once it's,
Can't see anything. Ah,
you can,
sorry.
I don't know if it's big enough, but basically, this shows a lot of the most simple ones. I mean, this is the smallest, obviously you can see the progression as it gets down to the big 4-spring motors, which you might find in some of the later high-end machines. But yeah, these, you can see the back plate, the bottom, they're generally all the same kind of style, and then it kind of switched over to this style, and then it kind of went into this style. But you can see they kind of went into single, doubles, 1 inch to 1.25 inches. They basically just progressed to the different size of motors. The one I'm working on today is this one. This one is slightly different. It's got a bigger barrel because this has got the crimp on the outer end, but it's kind of built into the barrel. Some of these have the crimp, it's in the barrel too, but
Is that a singles?
so these are doubles. This is a double and a double, so that's 4-spring motor. So all these will be singles, probably 1.25 inches. That'll be a double and a single motor or a single spring. So these older ones will be a 1 inch. As you move it to here, you're probably at 1.25 inch. So the thickness of springs, width of springs, I should say. So this would have been a 3-spring. It makes no difference. I find sometimes it's just as easy working on 2 springs in 1 barrel as opposed to 3 separate springs and 3 separate barrels, but it really makes no difference. Victrolas are some of the easiest ones to connect and work together. There's some motors that are pretty complicated. So on to the next picture is a simple diagram of how a motor operates. Similar to this one here, but this one's different. It's got pivots on here. So a lot of times I'll talk to a customer and they're like, how do I send this to you? I'm like, well, I don't need the whole cabinet. Like they don't understand what's on the inside. Like for me, it's like I open up, I see a motor, but they don't know what's on the inside. They probably think out of the box. They're probably thinking there's connections, you know, who knows what. It's just a simple motor. So in a Victrola, once you open it up, there's a prop and you pretty much just tilt it and you can prop it up and just leave it in a propped position. And if you can look at it, do whatever you want with it. So, but this is a typical Victrola. This is the motor, like I said, that I'm going to be working on. So you can see the governor, spring barrel, speed control. So that's pretty much this baby here, right there. So yeah, that's what you see when you get your pivots are usually here. And then once it's in the motor, you would just, I get it the right orientation, it would just simply prop up and stay in position. And you can look at things. You can't really work on motors too tight. So anyway, so the next picture. This is just something I found the other day on the internet. It's basically the same motor, but it's a cross section. So you can see the tone arm, the reproducer. This is the horn. It's showing the doors for what they call modulating doors. I just call it volume control. But motor board knob, a lot of people miss those. They don't even have them. But it's just a basic section diagram. When you're looking inside, you can see where the actual motor is and the crank, which typically is called a winding key, I guess technically. So next picture is basically, and I'll get back to this a bit later. This is just basically a picture of, I found on the internet, I think, or somebody has supplied it to me. It actually shows how you would actually install a spring into a spring barrel, which I will see if I can try and demonstrate today. But yeah, I didn't even realize, but if I read through it, it's pretty much exactly what I would probably do it if you were to do it by hand. Usually I put it into a vise and I'll show you later. So if you want to go to the next group of photos. So here's the most common tools that I would use in my shop. There's a lot of tools that my dad kind of would have made or manipulated or changed to do what he needs it to do. Sorry, this first one is my cranks. That's my on the side of my desk is every crank that I can pretty much use for when I'm working on a motor. So if I'm working on a motor, they don't send me a crank, I just grab one. I've got it labeled. So I've got Amberola, Edison, Diamond Disc, Brunswick, the Haley Motor, Victrola, Motor of Quality. So they all fit different, no motor pretty much has the same crank. So it's easier if I just have them all listed there. I think I even have a bin of ones my dad had that I haven't needed yet. So sometime I'll go into it and be like, oh, maybe I could use that one now. So once he's manipulated, I have no idea what they even do. So next picture. I didn't mean to bring this, but I just use it for my pointer. So yeah, just a simple tools. Everybody has these tools probably in their shop, but this is what I'm using right now. I find these 2 Craftsman screwdrivers are the ones I use the most. I find no matter what screwdriver I have, it's just never thin enough. I don't know how many times I'll put it in. Especially the little teeny tiny screws in the motors. So I always have generally a spot on my desk where I keep the most common tools because these pretty much fit almost every little teeny tiny slot. And then of course the tiniest one would be that one as well. So the hammer is obvious, but that's usually for poking out, and I'll show you later the pins in here. But cleaning out springs, the cleaning off the grease and oil. I'll get to that one later. Those I use for putting my barrel into the vise. So I'll clamp that into my vise when I need to. My dad had some made up, but they're starting to get a bit old. I was afraid of them breaking. So friend made those up. Now this one is an old screwdriver, what my dad manipulated to a nice fine little weird tip. It's just enough that it's good for pulling off inner coils of a barrel, because quite often the coil can be so tight you can't really get in there. Sometimes it gets too tight and I end up loosening it too much and have to rewind the spring. But this one here, I know people on Zoom probably can't see what I'm pointing at, but the vice grips it's got a little metal piece of a spring that my dad would use, and he would put it down into the center arbor and try to when he's putting a spring back on, so that it would slide the coil onto the spindle, the arbor, over top of the post, because quite often you can't get that down inside. So quite often he'll just take that, he'll put that down in. It doesn't always work, but it works sometimes. Works when it wants to. And then probably the tool I use the most, we call the get a grippers. My dad, so that's the one on the bottom right. My dad's favorite term was get a grip. And this is what I would use. My son, who couldn't be here today, Kyle and I named these the get a grippers. They work for everything when you need to definitely basically get a grip. So onto the motor part, I guess. No, actually you can, skip the other pictures. Those are just zoomed in pictures. One of the most important things is my little plastic container, so I don't lose anything. I've got my plastic container. So yeah, you can start
the motors.
Yep, you can start into the motors at A. So you can see.
You didn't see that one. Go back. Oh, shit.
I don't want to rush through this, but I
On this one?
don't know how much time I have either. So I brought this one in. I know people on Zoom can't really see what I'm doing. And I don't know how you guys want to do it with the camera. But how many people actually have seen or looked at one of these? Many people even really know? Probably a lot of you. There's probably a lot if you're just a collector, you probably don't know exactly.
So.
Yeah.
We should either show you or the picture, which.
Well, the pictures kind of show what I'm doing.
I think we were good. I think I can get.
Yeah, you can show the pictures. Can you use split screen or no?
So
No?
I'd rather show you.
Okay. Hang on, where's?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
good.
okay, so just bear with me for a second, just so I can make sure what I'm skipping ahead with.
Excuse me, maybe when we publish the article in the newsletter, we can use those pictures.
Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah, I don't know if I kept it on my phone. So, okay, I will want the pictures though for some other stuff, but anyway, so okay, I don't know what you can see, but I've got basically this just has a shaft down the middle. Like I said, this is one of the most common Victrola motors you can ever get, the simplest ones. The simplest thing is just to take that little screw out. And this is where my little thin screwdriver, I don't think any other screwdriver that I have in my shop really works for that. So even this bigger one probably doesn't work. No, not really. So this one I cleaned up the other day, so I was supposed to keep me somewhat clean. But that basically just has a shaft in the middle, which I would usually use a little tap to get that out. That's pretty much it. That's it. Now, if you don't know what you're doing, if that was under a lot of tension, that could spin off real good and cut my finger off. So I already knew it was under no tension, but if I was to put that back in and wind it all up, one thing my dad always taught me very important is to make sure you have no tension. Because if I was to have tension on that, the motor probably would have twisted on me and it would have been really tight and I wouldn't have been able to pull it out. And it probably would have been binding in gears a bit because it would have so much tension on there. I wouldn't be able to grab that. So there it is. The Victrolas are one of the easiest because they've got the crimp in the middle on this motor, which means I can pretty much just pop these out. Where most will have a post on here and you have to take the barrel apart, pop it off the post. And that's when I would use my pliers with the little steel piece on there. So that's my spring barrel. So normally I'd set that aside, clean up everything that's in here. This is your winding gear. There's just a pin, which I'm not gonna take probably off today, but that's where I would use my little thin tool. Pop that pin off, take that off, clean it up.
No, we're good, we're good.
I don't always take off the governor. But it's a pretty easy thing to do.
How many screws hold the governor on?
Basically, 2 screws to hold the bearings. You don't always have
One
to,
of them got loose.
don't have to take off both.
Does that affect the tune of a song you're playing? Cause I have one machine that I bought from John Fields. And when you're playing it, there's a waffle, like I have it, I don't know if I'm extra sensitive to it. And I'm wondering if that could be the problem.
Usually it would just affect your speed. See, I've already misplaced the screw I just had, so. Anyway, that's why I make sure I've got the
Yeah.
little thing there. But that pretty much just comes out. Some motors you have to take them both. They've got all different, but almost every motor has the basic same concept. I don't know if you can see, but this one's got a little bit of kink in it. If I had a customer, I would replace that spring because it's probably not gonna have a good spin to it to give it the
That could
proper
be a problem.
speed. It'd be a speed thing.
Yeah.
I've had customers all the time say these break or the weight's missing. So it's easy, screws. My dad would always say, no matter what, just make sure they're tight before you send it back to a customer. This is your speed control. So that's gonna control the arrow on the inside for your speed, which I'll get back to later. And then this is just your dial, which basically just sets the distance of this pad, friction pad, up against the disc of the governor. So that's pretty much that. So I will. Okay, spring barrel. Spring barrel. This is where I would use my modified screwdriver. It's got a bit of a point on it. They've got a ring around these, which keeps it on tight. And most times there's a little gap you can find somewhere and just pop these off. And don't let it fly on you. I've had people ask how these come off. A lot of times you can tap the side, it'll pop off. A lot of times I'll use just this with my hammer and I'll just go in there, find the opposite end of it and pop. So,
Couldn't this also be really dangerous?
once you get to here, because nothing's really gonna happen.
He knows how dangerous
Yeah.
it is.
No, I know, but.
Nothing's gonna, like, I think that's what people think is the spring's gonna fly out on you. It's like, well, it's under tension in a coil this way, like it's not gonna pop out that way unless I start trying to pull it out. So basically doing everything I did, there's really no risk factor that I would say. So yeah, so anyway, this is where it gets tricky. This is where I would normally put it in my vise. I would use my little blocks. I've got different sizes for different barrels. Put that in my vise. It's nice and tight in my vise. And then I just start pulling it out. So because I don't have a vise, I'm gonna do it by hand. But as you can see, it's not really all that hard if you know what you're doing. Once it's out a bit, I try to put my finger in and grip the barrel, and then I've got the spring. And once I've got the spring, this isn't gonna go anywhere. And I've got my hand on the rest of it.
Sorry.
And I just start feeding it out. Yeah, my mom's here. She's worried I'm gonna die. Maybe I shouldn't have brought her. Because I don't do this usually by hand, it wouldn't take me a bit longer, but. What pictures do I have? There are some pictures I'm gonna want to show.
Yeah.
Once it gets. Want to pop out a little bit more. I've seen people online or heard people that would put it into a box and they just kind of let it fly. I guess you could do that, but I, like my dad would say, I like to get a grip, so I figure as long as I got a grip on it, it's not going anywhere. So I usually just let it out. So I'm at the end.
Yeah.
I'm at the end. I gotta kind of give it some pressure to push it towards outside so it catches the big end of the hole. There, but. That's out. There's my spring. Of course, this has got two, so you take out the inner spot.
Oh, yeah.
That's usually thick of grease. I said I cleaned this one up the other day. And then you've got the second one. Second one gets a little bit harder because it's got the pin from the other side. Sometimes it wants to catch on the pin as you pull it out, so you have to be careful, but once it's got a tight coil, it usually just pops in. Pops in. So what do we got for pictures?
What photos do you want?
Just bring up the folder. Okay, so just go next, 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 next. So right there.
One back?
So this motor that I worked on the other day was different. You can see someone obviously had a broken spring. There was a hole, somebody punched a hole in for a nail. Obviously, it wasn't a very good hole and it popped off. So obviously it had to come to me because somebody didn't fix it properly. Happens all the time. So next photo. So that's just the inside where it connects. Next photo. So that's they cleaned up, greased up. Yeah, next. Okay, so at this point, I've got a little trick. Okay. Oftentimes you get I get a motor, get a spring. I don't know the size of the spring. How do I know how long that spring is? Besides people who already know, like Angelo, anybody know how long that is? No. Probably don't know. So I just came up with an idea. Like, how do you know, what spring do I put back into it? 5 foot, 10 foot, 12 foot. So I've got. Yeah, the pictures will show it, but you can do it by Zoom. I made a nice string, which is 18 feet long. Clip it to the end. And in about a minute, I can tell you the length just by going around. Trying to do it fast, so of course I'll probably mess it up and take twice as long. But I'll go around and without doing the whole thing. Maybe I will, I don't know, it's fast. I'll just go around the whole spring. And I can tell you already, by the time I get to the middle, I was about there when I got to the middle. So once I got to the middle, take it all off, clip one end to my workbench, clip the other end of the workbench, measured out 17.5 feet.
Wow.
So that's how long the spring was. So I know exactly how long. The one I did the other day was much shorter. I could tell because there wasn't much spring in the barrel. And for the customer, I just replaced one spring. So I'm like, oh, that's a shorter spring. So I had a shorter spring and I just used that one instead. So that was just something I came up with one day because I'm like, I've got to figure out what size this is because I'm not going to put in a 12-foot spring, or let's say a 10-foot spring when it should be 12 feet, because often my dad would not replace both springs, and you don't want two different size springs because one's going to be wound tight, and one's not going to be tight enough yet. So that was what I came up with. Picture wise. Yeah.
Do you want photos?
Yeah, just go to photos, I'll flip through them again. How am I for time?
Which
So,
ones do you want?
so that's basically just flip through the next one. That's just me winding it at home because I was thinking I'd have pictures instead of Zoom, measuring it out. And then, so that's where it comes, the spring comes in from the supplier. Basically just comes in a retaining ring. You can see I push it out. Next picture, you can see kind of what I just showed now. I push it out further until I get a grip on it. And then I just keep pushing it out. Again, the instructions I showed earlier say that you can actually let some of the spring out, put it into the barrel. Sorry, let some of the spring out, catch the end onto the barrel, and then pop the spring in and it'll pop into place. I've never done it. My dad never showed me that. So I still just pop this into my vise, throw the spring in, and then feed it in on my vise. So next, so that's me just feeding it out. Next. And you can see that for some reason, when I get the stuff from my supplier, the spring is like, it's never really a tight coil. Honestly, I don't know if it makes a big difference, but to me, that's not a tight coil coming from the guy that makes it. So next picture, this I can't just do here. My dad made a spring winder, which was based on one that Don Woodrow had. I tried tightening it, and you can see how successful I wasn't for a bit. Well, successful at the end, but I manipulated a crankshaft winding key with an end similar to one of these. Next picture. So I'm feeding it through the spring barrel. I do wear gloves because I don't want that breaking on me. I've actually had the crank break on me once, which means the spring is gonna uncoil real fast. Next. So that's the spring tight as I can get it. Which usually don't do that tight in a phonograph because that's usually when you start getting wear on it and it starts to break. So you can see that like I've got a pin in there. It's nice and tight. But it wasn't tight enough. Only problem with these is I almost want it tighter than it's supposed to be. And I find from the manufacturer they're the right diameter, but if it's not a tight enough coil, it's not going to catch the pin on the arbor. It's not going to catch. This next picture. That's just my
Next one.
modified, yep. Another one. Next. So you can see, go back now, you can see that's my tightened coil that I've got. Now I still found that that inner coil wasn't tight enough. Next.
That's it.
Is that it? No, it should be.
No more.
Is that
Is
it?
it in the next one?
No, maybe that's it. I found that like you can't really see, but the crimp on the inner end has to catch into this groove. And I found that if it doesn't catch, if I can't see it in here, it's probably not going to catch. It's going to go in, it's going to spin. So I found that after I even did what I did, it wasn't catching. Yeah, there's got to be more. No pictures? No, maybe I
Are you
didn't.
sure it's not in the other?
Maybe I just didn't. Maybe I forgot them, but anyway, so just go down to the
Scroll
bottom.
down.
Scroll down. Yeah, yeah, up to like H. We should be around. Should be at G.
Where is it?
No, H.
G1,
Yeah,
Be a little
H7.
H. H1.
Yeah,
7 or 1?
up one.
Try
Right there?
Right
H2.
there,
and
yeah,
then-
click that.
Yeah, just click that. So that's me feeding into the
Sure.
barrel. Next picture.
He's just gonna
I'm
show.
just gonna zip through them. Oh, okay, sorry.
Next picture?
So what I used to do is, again, use this one tool that I've got. I find that sometimes, especially Columbia, it doesn't want to seat onto the pin. So quite often I'll take this with a hammer and I'll tap the end of the spring just to make sure it seats. Next. And then I'll just make sure it seats inside that pin. Otherwise, if it doesn't seat, it's gonna pop off. That's why I don't like just putting a spring in and letting the spring do the work, like some people might do to catch it, because I like to physically see that it catches. Next. So that's next. So you can see it's not quite centered, but usually as long as that catches, it's good. So next. That's me feeding in my grease. I think we did miss, I forgot some other pictures earlier, but that's fine. Next. And my other tool that I use all the time is for cleaning off the grease, because quite often you get quite a bit of thick grease, especially at the ends. Next. And I usually inspect the spring because quite often you get some hairline cracks in the hole. And if it's got any sort of cracks, you know it's probably not going to last long enough. So I've had one where customer sent me a 3-spring motor and each one of them had some sort of cracks in it. I said, you're gonna have to replace all 3 of your springs because they're not gonna last. I actually took apart a motor, the other one like this, the other day to sell a customer the used motor, the used springs, because some customers want good used springs, they're cheaper. Both of them had tension, both of them had cracks in them. They both had some fracture cracks, so it probably would have wound, it probably would have played, but it would have given out soon. But both of them had cracks. So next. I just thought this is interesting. I don't know how many people really know, but a lot of the original, or most of the original, have the His Master's logo, His Master's Voice logo imprinted. So you can usually tell if it's an original spring. It's just usually printed right at the end of the spring. It's just kind of neat. So next. And that's just me feeding in a spring with some grease. Next. And that's pretty much my vise with the clamps, the wood clamps, and greased up So, next. So a lot of times, my dad would say, if that ring doesn't fit in tight, he'd say, well, shave off a piece of this. Well, I found my vice grips would be good, because what I would just do is, a lot of times you'll get a gap at the outer end. So I usually just take 3 or maybe 3 of these, clamp it at each different spot in there, and eventually it forces it to the outer edge of the barrel enough that eventually it pops into place. So I've usually not had to modify any of those rings. So next. My other big tool of the trade, I actually got that from Don Woodrow, is my steel wheel. And I use that for cleaning up all my gears. It works really good. And the other thing would be my, I got a lot of these steel brushes, and they're really good for cleaning out the teeth of gears. So, and my box from my fridge in my shop, I use as a splash shield. So every time I go to use it, I throw out this big box, and that's my splash shield because I got too much stuff around it. Next. So because I didn't have a good tight, I tried it again, but this time I manipulated my device, and I just tried to tighten the spring in the barrel, and it worked, but again, it wasn't a tight enough. So next. And then I got creative. Probably not, maybe not the best, but it worked. I didn't know how to tighten up this thing, so it was tighter than the arbor of what I've got. So I ended up looking all over, looking, I'm like, okay, I've got some drill bits, wood bits for drilling holes. So I'm like, maybe this will work. So I stuck it right down the middle, and it was enough to catch. I used a couple small ones, and I just put that on my drill, and then I tightened up that spring. Next. So that's the drill bit I use. I just stuck it in there. It's not a perfectly round hole, but as long as it's tight enough that it gets into that groove, it works. Next. And you can see, you know, it's just there. It obviously was in enough to catch. Next. And I find that if for any reason the spring doesn't, if I can't, sometimes the springs are off center. And if it's off center, sometimes I'll just take my trusty adjusted screwdriver, I'll stick it through, and then I'll push it so that it's in the right spot. Because this has to go on, and if it's in the wrong spots, it's not going on anywhere. So I'll usually use that from the other side and make sure it pops on. Next. And you can see it kind of seats properly there. Next. So this customer's, which is not this motor, when I was winding it, another thing I find is if once you're all done, you're like, okay, great, it's gonna work. So you crank it up, crank it up. One thing I've learned is don't just crank it up and stop. Because in this case, there was some worn ratchet pawl, and it would back off real quickly. So basically there was a worn spot on that pawl, and it wasn't gripping, so it wouldn't backstop. So I mean, for you guys in the room, there's this pawl that'll stop the yeah, you want to show that? So this will come through, and it'll catch that gear to stop it from spring, you know, obviously from unwinding. And this pawl had some damage on it, and it wasn't catching those teeth. So
So how do you fix that, Brian?
change it.
That's all you-
Luckily, these aren't that hard to come off. I don't know if I can do it. Yeah, so that just came off. So I just found, I've got a whole bag of these in my shop. I actually found a lot that were damaged. I just found one that was really good. So that just comes off basically. It gets held in place by the gear there. So okay, next. So next.
Sorry, 1 second.
So that's the damaged one.
Next.
And there it's replaced and seating properly. Next. Okay, if we're still doing okay for time, I don't want to run long. Yeah, because I'm
I have a short presentation, so.
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so yeah, so basically I use my screwdriver to hold up the arm for the speed control, because you know, if it's right down to the bare wood in the bottom, it's gonna be like a brake. So next. So I know it's gonna be hard on Zoom, but on the governor friction pad, there's a little another pad which is actually for your arrow, for your speed indicator. And I've actually found with one customer in particular, I did a house call and I looked at it, sprayed some oil on it. This friction pad was really tight and seized in here and it was actually forcing the governor from going anywhere. So once that was freed up, because it should move freely, next, it's basically, you can see in this video, that friction pad, it's kind of hidden by there. It should move with the governor disc as the brake, as the speed control moves, that should move with it freely. So next. So there's the arrow for the speed indicator. Usually they don't point to the right direction, the right speed. Next. And you can see there's just a small, tiny little spring inside of it that just is enough to put a little bit of pressure on that governor so that the speed control. So that this is what I'll talk about. That should just move freely. Next. Next. So there I'm just showing how it should move. You can kind of see how it moves quickly. The one behind it, that's the one that's actually governing the speed. This one here, it's just for the dial of the arrow up here. You can move to the next. And that's my tool that I use, that I came up with. It's just basically the end of a ratchet, screwdriver set with a bit there. So underneath here, I don't know if you want to switch again, but underneath, we've got the arrow dial. You want to switch back to the, oh yeah, you got there. So once it's at the right speed, this will move, but I have to kind of hold, if it's too tight, basically I just use this. I'll pop that off and unscrew the nut. And it just, that way I don't lose the nut, so it's really small. Once it's on tight, put a screwdriver on there and you pretty much just move the dial wherever you want to. And once it's up to speed, you want to just set it to 78 once it's at the right speed. You don't want to, obviously if I do it now at 78, it's going to move on me once it's up to speed. So that's how you would adjust the speed dial. Next.
You want the photos?
Yeah. So that's basically just me putting a screwdriver on it just to hold it in place. And then you can adjust the needle by hand. Next. And then that's where it's set, 78. Next. Is that it? I think that's it. That's it. So I'll take questions, I think. So
Fine.
yeah, Sasha, I think I saw first. So.
Is there a specific phrase you use for this drill?
Yeah, can you pull up my other pictures? The very, I think the tools picture. I didn't get
The
to
tools photo that was up before.
the tools. Yeah, I didn't really get to the products I use. I got to the tools I used, but not the products I used.
Yeah.
First off, what's important is the direction of the spring. My dad would always have paper on his workbench and he would write the direction of the spring on his piece of paper. I found a piece of paper gets too oily. Well, then all of a sudden you forget what direction it is. Now, of course, I'm in the next age. I take pictures of everything. I'll go back and I'll look at my pictures of what direction. In the other instructions I showed earlier, it actually says you can etch it on here. I used to do arrows on here, but if I put Sharpie on here, then it washes off when I clean the barrel. So that doesn't work either. But it's always important which direction these go in. I always find, I think if it's a double barrel, they go opposite directions. So, so this one, usually you can tell which way they go in by the way they attach. Sometimes it depends on how they're attached to the arbor too. So, yeah, so that's. Did you have pictures?
Yeah, but
Okay.
Ryan, I had a question about the governor.
Yeah.
I've
one is it?
heard different people say, some people say you're supposed to leave the governor loose so it can move back
Yeah.
and forth a bit, and other people say no, have it so it's snug. Can you comment about that?
I definitely wouldn't do it snug. As So did you have I was kind of gonna do two things at once here, but did you have the pictures?
Yeah,
I do,
I
but
have
we'll
them.
wait till you're done here.
Okay, I'll answer your question in a second. So that's tight and snug. And if the speed control off, I have to pull that up to, otherwise it's not gonna move. It's. Actually, what doesn't look snug? It still is. It's not seated properly. There, well, now it is. All right. So that's snug. It's moving, but it can move a lot freer than that. My dad always said, just give us some wiggle room. So he would always say, back it off about 1/8 of an inch. Let's back it off a little bit. All motors are different in that sense. There are some motors that have off-center holes. And if you turn the bearing, the off-center will pull it away or push it towards the gears. And that will give it more grip to the gears. But I mean, you can see it's got a little bit more snug to it now, but you definitely don't want it snug. You want to give it a little bit of wiggle room. So, yeah.
Hold on. I got a question from Don Mayer.
Yeah.
Don, did you have a question?
Yeah, sort of a comment with respect to which way to wind in the springs. Sometimes if you have a look at the inside edge of the spring barrel, you can see a little bit of scoring that was done by the rounded end of the spring as somebody back in the day inserted it. That can give you a clue if you've forgotten to write a spiral or take a photograph. But what's interesting, you might find, if I can show this, this is, I believe, an original tool for doing spring repairs. And it's a pair of pliers, basically does that. And if you look at the end of it, you can see what's supposed to happen. That if you have a spring, an inner spring loop, and it's not tight enough, you can put the spring into there. And when you pinch down on it, you can see that it will make it a smaller diameter. So that's a way of reforming the inner edge of the spring.
Yeah.
So
That's neat too. That's
That's actually.
definitely a nifty way. So, because yeah, the inner coil can definitely be hard to tighten up if you don't have any other proper tools, or there's definitely no tools. You can just go buy at Home Hardware for these things. So,
Okay, do you want to go to the photo?
Yeah, do you want
Yep.
photos?
so going back to the products, I skipped ahead. Just go next. So this is the one thing I use. My dad had a big parts washer, but the parts washer I found he used to use extreme, industrial solvents and stuff. Can't really even buy them anymore. It's probably a good thing, they're not good for your health. So I've been finding some more, the newer stuff that's better. And this is just full of WD-40 parts cleaner. And I'll quite often dunk everything that I've got in there, scrape them off with wire brushes, steel wool, or use my wire brush. So, and I usually use this little strainer so that I can put the little screws in and not lose them in the holes. Next. So WD-40 is pretty much everything I use. And you can see the pad that I use is simply just something I get from Dollarama. No, I don't have a product plug, but for $1.50, I can get 2 of these unless the price went up. They're so much better than steel wool. I find steel wool falls apart. It gets gummed up. It doesn't work because it's got too much grease in it. I can throw these into some cleaner solution and it usually comes, fairly clean and they don't wear out very quickly. So you can see that's one I've been using for quite a bit and I'll just use that instead of steel wool. It's just a harsh scrubbing pad from Dollarama. Next. Here's my steel wool or steel grinding tool that I use for cleaning off my parts. Next. And that's your answer, Sasha. I just use multi-purpose grease. My dad's always got it from Canadian Tire. For a while it wasn't available, but I've been able to get it again. Next picture. There's a bigger picture of it. Next, that's it. I remember Bert Hurt was in, and I'm pretty sure he was saying to use this one. If I got the right stuff, I think it was this green grease. I find this stuff is like gum. It's just so gooey. It's just, I don't know, I find it's almost too sticky. Harder to work with too. It's very stringy. So I find, never liked it. I just keep using what I'm using. I know a lot of people, you can talk to diehard people, they'll go back to the Vaseline and the graphite and they'll be diehard this, diehard that. one of those ones that it's like, you know what, modern grease works just fine. So, yeah. Next, do you have a question, Paul?
Yeah, those, motors that have the eccentric, adjusting, points to each end.
Yeah.
You gotta be extremely careful about that, because what really they're there for
Mhm.
is to change the mesh on the fiber governor gear,
Okay,
and if you don't get them back the same way, that gear will be very noisy.
okay,
So that was cheaper motors.
Yeah.
We paid people, instead of having good machining on them,
oh, yeah,
they would pay people to set them up and get them right.
okay.
And so.
We're talking about the bearings.
Places don't take them out,
Yeah,
leave it alone.
yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of times I don't touch the governor. If I can, I clean it up right in place.
Yeah,
But there are some times where I'll clean it up, I'll get it running, and for some reason it's not running smoothly. And then sometimes you do have to adjust it. And sometimes it's a noisy motor too. And I find sometimes just turning it a bit, like you said, after enough wear of that gear, sometimes it just needs to be pulled in a bit. So. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, Don.
I'm usually working on, machines that some weekend warrior has already had.
Yeah.
So is there a chart someplace that tells you how long the spring is on each motor? Because often I'll have a spring that has been broken and somebody just took a hammering nail, put another hole in,
Yeah.
and put it back in, disregarding the fact that it's now however many feet short.
Yeah.
But how do you tell what it should have been
Uh,
originally?
There's a couple things that I use, the Victor data book. Which I don't know if you have, but it has almost every machine almost that Victrola had. And in there, it has serial numbers and it's pretty accurate. It almost has everything and it'll say what spring size was in those motors. So that's the Victrola data book. I believe you can still buy them on paper book, probably Amazon or eBay, paperback. I can show you, I've got a PDF copy I can show you too. Other than that, because I didn't know exactly myself, there was a lot that I didn't know of. Now that Brian Parlier from the phonograph shop is doing springs, his website lists a lot of common springs and their sizes, or I'll ask him. Like a motor of quality, they've got a few different size springs. All he really needs to know is the motor, the diameter of the inside of the barrel, the diameter of the arbor, the thickness of the spring and the width of the spring, and he'll pretty much tell you what should be in that. He's got a calculation that says, well, if it's a 3.5 inch barrel, then you'll probably want a 10 to 12 foot spring. And yeah, like if you don't know what size it is, you want to keep it as close as you can, so. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Right now, it has two springs and both of them are different heights.
Yeah.
So I know for sure one of them's wrong.
Yeah,
So,
probably. I had the same thing. I had a 3-spring motor and I thought I'd just be replacing one that was broken. Well, one was broken, one was a different size, one was a different thickness. So I basically said, yeah, you're replacing all three. I think it was a Columbia, so I knew Columbia has a standard spring size. So I said I'm just replacing all three. So yeah.
When I was a kid, I knew an Edison dealer. He
Yeah.
showed me how to repair springs.
Okay.
And you try to repair the inner end, but the outer end.
Yeah.
All you need to do is anneal it a little bit.
Yeah.
You can see the blue moving back with it, just with a torch, don't overdo it.
Okay.
And then you can punch it.
Yeah.
And you can drill a hole and file the pear shape.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
and
done that.
Works beautifully.
Done that many times. I find it's takes a bit of time, but yeah, you can certainly take a torch at the end of the spring, take the temper out. I find a lot of times if there's enough temper out, I'll just leave it and I'll punch a new hole like right about there somewhere. Because the temper is gone about, about there. But yes, quite often you have to go down a bit further, take the temper out, drill a couple holes, file it out. It's a lot of work to do it, but if it's the
Works again next spring.
yeah.
Maybe not for where you live.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, for a lot of people who don't have access to springs, that's definitely a fix you can certainly do. So, yeah. What's that?
Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I'm done.
If-
I don't need to put this back in.
I could add something to that in response to the question about how do I determine the original spring size. This goes back a few decades, but I think I've got a printout from Windsor Springs, WINDSOR, and it lists, oh, I don't know, 2 or 3 pages of spring sizes with all the dimensions for all the different manufacturers at that time. So that if you know those words, you might be able to just find it on the internet.
So you know of one, or you just, you know there is something available?
Well, I have a copy of it down in my toolbox down there. It's probably a little greasy by this time, but I know it exists because I have.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, it does. I remember.
okay. Yeah, it might be something I'd be interested in. I don't know if it's,
Could
there's
you
still
also,
resources.
could you also please make sure that you put a link to the PDF you mentioned earlier?
Myself, there's no link available. It's just something I personally did. It was a lot of work. So yeah, but Victrola Data Book is the book that you would want if you're gonna do anything as far as research on motors.
Then I'm sure we'll have an article later on too, then maybe we can put it in there.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm done.
Yes, awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Maybe during break, I can put the spring back in and people can watch me do it here in the room. But yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Fabulous.
No problem.
It's really interesting.
You gotta
We
think that's
could have gone the whole meeting.
I probably
Oh,
could've gone.
Angela wants to add something?
A word of thought.
Yeah.
What Brian did here is with,
There.
you can do it by hand. Don't ever try and Edison out.
Oh, yeah. No, Edison's are a little thicker steel and they're, I think they're thicker steel, right? Or they're just stiffer.
That spring is 18,000.
Yeah, yeah.
The Edison old airside standard is 32,000. So
Right.
it's one of the tough times of it.
They're thick.
So don't try doing that.
I'm trying to do it by hand. I never do it by hand. I was just throwing it. It can be done, but no, I always use a vise. That would listen.
Thank you. Okay, we gotta move on to our next presenter. Anyway, Brian, thank you very much. I think that was so informative. Okay, Steve Revin's gonna show us the magic that he works with horns.
Okay,
Do you have enough room?
so. For a couple decades, I worked as a history textbook illustrator, did a lot of editorial work as well, so my draftsmanship's pretty good. This particular horn here, I got for $50 here at the club meeting.
I'll present to them and I'll. Don't worry.
Oh, okay, can I just set it up? Yeah. But it was covered with an orange-brown paint. Someone had probably painted in the 1980s. And their attempt at painting the flowers was wrong. So it was a brave attempt. So I thought, well, this is an opportunity just to strip it right down to the nickel plating and deconstruct, figure out exactly how the TNT company painted their flowers. If you Google roses hand painted, you won't see this particular technique. This is particular to phonograph horns. So I carefully analyzed how they did this, and I think I've got it pretty close to bang on. And I thought, this might not work, but we'll try. I thought I would give a demonstration here of the technique they used. Like I said, it's a very particular technique. I thought one of the fringe benefits of giving a demonstration is that there's a lot of hand-painted flowers that aren't original to the time period. You know, people in the 1980s, the 1970s, they took attempts at it. They didn't get it right. I'd like to think I got it pretty close to bang on here. I figured out the formula. 2 major ingredients in the formula. Number 1, time is money. So they did it really quickly. If you look at the brushstrokes on original flowers, you can see they were just motoring. They're using a chisel brush and a line brush. The second quality is they had to look good. And some of them are stunning. Within the quick time that they put these flowers on, the talent is very noticeable. So these guys weren't regular factory workers. They probably got these people out of art school that had a certain amount of talent, and they weren't all equal. My favorite of all the artists that painted these flowers is a guy that did horns for a company called the Imperial Phonograph Company. Now that's a pretty obscure company, but actually I'm just thinking it might be too much here. This is a last minute idea, but if you were to go to Google image and type in Imperial Phonograph, the horn will come up and you'll see the artist they hired for that was the best of the bunch. Like some guys are really clumsy, but this guy was really talented. I think they based the whole gramophone company just on this guy's ability to paint these horns, because the machine itself is just plain Jane, dovetails in the corners, nothing fancy, but they have the best handed painted flowers horns that I've seen. I had a list of over 80 different flowered horns in a file on my computer one time, but he was by far the best. But the machines were just cheapo machines. They were Columbia client machine. So I don't know if I'll goof you up here, but if there is a moment, yeah, we'll bring it up, and you'll see that he was painting these flowers really quickly. Might have been a woman, so really quickly, and they're really just wonderful. There's a magic to it, where a lot of the repaints that are done today, you can see they have the formulas, particular formula to this, but it's like they're forgetting to make them look like flowers. Like it's all formula, but it's like they don't have the talent to just look and see if they get the magic of a real rose coming out of this thing. I know there's a guy in the States that sells repainted horns. And like I say, he's got the formula, he's got a lot of the technique, but it just is, he's got the formula, but he doesn't have the magic. Like I've been a great painter since I was grade 1. And it's just the talent isn't there. But I thought the fringe benefit of showing exactly how these flowers are put on is that if you're buying horns at let's say Stanton's, I've seen a lot of repainted horns in the Stanton's auction, and they have it mentioned in the description that these are original horns, but the flowers have been repainted. I can spot them a mile away. I don't think I can spot my own horn miles away. I think I've got it pretty good here, but I'll go through how they go. So this is a repainted horn here.
No, we need to see it.
Oh,
What kind of paint did they use? An oil-based paint?
well, they only had oil-based paint.
Yeah.
I'll cheat and I'll use acrylics because oil takes a long time to dry. And one of the problems with oil paint, because they only had oil at the top, as you can imagine, when you're painting on here, if your elbow goes into some section, isn't dry yet, because it takes 3 or 4 days for oil to dry. You may have goofed up a whole section here if you're not paying attention. These, in terms of the primer underneath, they really vary. I put methyl hydrate on a horn and found that the original lacquers just disappeared really quickly, which tells me that it's shellac based. The other ones must have been lacquer based because methyl hydrate won't have the same effect. So they were using different clear primers on this. Biggest mistake people make on these is they don't recognize that this wonderful finish here is semi-opaque. It's like you need the nickel plating to come shining through. They'll get a can of red spray paint and they'll spray it and they'll wonder what happened to the magic of the horn. They won't realize that no, these are tints. You have to put these on as tints. So that's one way of spotting one that isn't original. The exceptions are, especially the TNT company, they used tints on the red and blue horns, but they had lime green, they had pink, they had different colors. Those are opaque colors. But the reds and blues were this particular tint. And it's hard to get. It took me a while to get this tint. I don't know if you can get a close up. You see how there's a kind of glow of the nickel plating coming through? It's like you lose the magic of these horns if you don't get that nickel plating coming through. They're not like a semi-opaque horn. Now I know these flowers here are just bang on structurally, they're bang on correct because they took some tracing paper And I traced out original flowers. These are original flowers on this one here. So, this is a classic P&T configuration. You always have two flowers jamming right here at the very, very top. You know, usually where the hook is. These tiny little green leaves are typical for TNT. The other horn painters usually had larger flowers. So these small ones here, they're typical of TNT. So that's a TNT horn. TNT horns are really easy to identify because if the decal isn't on it, if you look really closely, I haven't found one yet. Incised in the metal here, you'll see T-Tray Company. I've looked and looked on Google image. I've never seen a T-Tray Company horn that had the white yellow inner core. I think those are standard steel. Those are, you know, the standard steel horns are never marked. Some people think they're Hawthorne and Shout, but I find the Hawthorne and Shout horns, they're always well marked. And they're not hand painted horns, they're actually a decal. Very often you get sort of a diagonal bouquet on the Hawthorne and Shouts. I suspect Hawthorne and Shout may have had the patent rights and that standard steel had to pay patent royalties, but I'm not sure if anyone knows exactly how that went. But the T-Tray companies are very easy to identify. The roses themselves, both standard steel and TNT had the exact same formula. And I call it the dot bowl technique. And I'll try to set it up here. Like I said, I'm not sure how well this is going to work, but we'll give it a shot. But I'll try to give a demonstration of the dot bowl that pretty much all flower horns obey this formula of painting. So obviously this is nickel plating, but I cheaped out. It's just a piece of steel.
You know what? Show it to them and I'll work the camera around that.
Okay. Okay. You lucky people are at the front. We'll see this, the people at the back. But here's one of the classic mistakes people make. The reds in pretty much all the companies were a Rizian crimson. That's the color they used. And like I said, they're not opaque. Here's an opaque version of Rizian crimson. It's also black. So you can see it's been thinned down. And that is where people usually goof up. They don't realize there's just a tint of this color on the nickel plating. Now, if this was nickel plating, this would glow wonderfully. But because it's just steel, it's just for the demonstration to give you a sense of how this color needs to be thinned down to get the look right. Now, okay, well, we'll give this a shot. See if I can create a demonstration how they did this.
If I may interject for one moment, I was really fascinated by our speaker's presentation today, and I found the Victor Data book is available online from Mulholland Press. I put a link for it into the chat of the Zoom session.
Awesome, thank you.
Are we all out of water? My throat's dry right out here.
Yeah, there's a bottle of water over there.
Yeah, or even a Coke. I just
Yeah. Well,
yeah, Coke.
are these designed Morning Glory?
Yeah, I think they're always on the Morning Glory. This one here I called the bat wing, the one with the sharp edges.
Yeah.
And with the scallop edge,
Mhm.
I sort of refer to those as Morning
Yeah,
Glories.
very nice. Remember you pulled that chair.
They're both TNT companies. They did both the bat wing and the scalloped edge TNT. Should put some vodka in it.
One of my basket.
Okay, can we get the?
We're good. You just put it with the audience.
Good.
Don't worry about the video.
Okay, so here, can we get to?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the first thing they did after they got the tint of red down this way, was they made a very quick outline of the flower that went in oil paint, in white. And this is the critical part. I had to make a few attempts at getting this right. It's really tempting to go too opaque when you put that first coat of white down. And with most flowers, when you're painting them with oil paint, you're blending the red and the white together. But here, because time is money, what they did was they let the background red dry, and then they put white on and let it dry. And there is no blending. The way you get halftones in the flower itself is they moved, let's say in this case here, the white from a high density, and then they thinned it out with their finger into a low density. You know, so you get opaque to semi-opaque just through the pressure of their thumb. And well, it's better to demonstrate that rather than explain it, I guess. So here we are. We have it here. This is the outline of the flower they would have put down first. And the next step they would have done, actually, is the backbone of what they all did, and it's called the dot bowl technique. So you got a dot here and a bowl at the edge. So you grab the red. They would have initially put this on with a brush. This. And then they would have followed up with their finger. And you can see I have a range of tones there. But I haven't blended the red and the white. The white is completely dry, but I still get that range of tone. And then that's the dot, and here's the bowl. You know, the people that did this, they probably did it 9 to 5, so they'd be very practiced. They'd move much quicker than I am. This is like the second time or third time I've tried this. So I'm not as practiced. It's like anything, you know, you're playing the piano, the first time through it's a little clumsy. So that's the backbone of what they did here. It's called the dot and bowl. Now, the second stage was they would have taken this tint of white that they put down. And they would have made more opaque areas to give the illusion of a range of tones. So same thing. Oh, I still got red paint on the finger. Who was that guy on PBS who had the giant afro? Bob. Yeah.
Hold that
Yeah,
up.
that's right. That's me right now. I need the afro, but
Could you hold it up so they can see what you did?
okay. So I'm beginning to put an opaque white on top of the semi-opaque.
Turn it this way.
But it was actually a horn I was fixing for Mark that I looked and I thought, they're not blending the paint here. They're letting the different layers dry, and then they're just smudging through to get a gradation of tone. And the backbone of that would have been time is money. At least like they wanted to do it quickly. But like I said, if you look on Google image under roses, hand painted roses, you won't see this. It's just particularly what they did with phonograph.
A lot of the repainted ones, I find the flowers are just overly done. Like someone's trying to do a really nice artistic flower, and that's not what these look like.
We got Garrett's looking, I think.
They're fast. They do look. Once I saw them do this, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Friend of mine, trained as a Delft painter in Holland, Netherlands, and that's the kind of work he did on glass, milk bottles, tin. And that's the kind of work he did, but all freehand. And the paintings, could have never known, were just like real flowers. He had that knack to get that
Yeah.
color mixture and that. And he was fast, like he could do a milk bottle like that in 10, 15 minutes, but it was all freehand. But he was trained as a Delft painter over there. And he probably did some phonograph horns over there, because that's the style. They did a lot of glass work too, and tin.
Well, it's called the tea tray company, so I'm guessing they did tea trays too.
Yeah.
You know, on tin, on metal, they're probably hand painted roses. Actually, went to Google Image and I T-Tray company T-Tray just to see. And I suspect they all deteriorated if they did. There's no examples of. Oh, the technique, you look really hard and trial and error. I did some experiments. This isn't working, that's not working. And then
He's a professional restorer who does stuff for collections and very expensive things like ceramics and things like that. So he's got a lot of experience too.
yeah. And actually I find that like very often they would use a clear shellac or shellac as a base. And I use shellac all the time because the bonding agent shellac is just amazing. You know, I'll have a palette, like a plate, a palette out, and I'll be mixing different colors. And they'll dry and I'll try to scrub them off. And the shellac is the last thing I can get off that plate because the binding agent is so good. You start it with a clear shellac as a binding agent. So you can see I've moved to opaque. Moved to opaque highlights here. And it's beginning to look more three-dimensional, more like a rose.
Hold it up.
Sure. Oh. Okay.
Amazing.
What's better, the screen behind me or for people at the back? That's better if I hold it up?
Yeah, we can see there's much more detail in that.
Okay.
Yeah, you're getting a three-dimensional look, and that's how he had three-dimensional look.
Mhm.
The-
Okay. So I've gone ahead and this is the final phase right here. This one here. Now you think, oh, Steve, that doesn't really look like, I should keep one of these up here so we can see what the flowers look like. So there's the final flowers there. Now, if you compare that to the stage I've come to, which is almost at the end, but it isn't, Steve, what you're doing isn't convincing. It doesn't look like this. But this last moment here, something pulls the whole look of the flower together. And it's a matter of using simple opaque lines. They would have used a line brush at the time. Hope I brought one. Oh, my line brush has red in it. Can I use this?
Cool stuff.
Yeah. My white might look a little pink now, but. And because I don't do this every day, I've got a little cheat sheet here in terms of the lines. Okay.
You want some water?
It's oil paint.
Oh.
So I'm gonna thin the white down for these lines a little bit. Because it'll be a little too sticky. We'll pull the lines through if I don't. Could you pull up the Imperial phonograph horn or?
Actually, we'll wait to the end.
Wait to the end?
Because I want to see.
I just because I'm.
No, I think we want to
Time
watch.
for a little intermission. Okay.
I don't dip it.
Oh, yeah, as long as I'm not driving Brian nuts here using his red beard.
No. I got tons of.
Here, I'll give you Dr. Bill Heck here.
So here's the crunch. They would have used what's called the line brush, very, very long brush. And if you look at those strokes, they were just like slashing through them really, really quickly. I'm not going to do that because I have to kind of look because I haven't memorized how the slashes go. Usually they start out with the wide in the middle. So right in the middle here, you've got, you see the line brush would have been better already, being a bit clumsy here. And then another line here, little extra as they start. And I need more thinner on this. So if I did this 9 to 5 days a week, I could motor through it, but this is like the second time. It's been a few months since I've tried. But this is the exact formula. Like once you see this demonstration, you'll spot the repaints unless I did it. But this, I've only done 2, I don't plan on doing anymore. Yeah, sure. Here.
This may sound like a stupid request, but for those of us who are semi-artistically challenged, is there any way that you could put out a series of photographs, sort of a paint by numbers kind of thing, with suggestions or hints?
I'd want royalties on something. Like that.
That would be great.
My oil paint's the wrong consistency and it's sticking here, so I can't really motor.
But you did one of the horns, right?
Yeah, I took more time to make sure the paint was thin. It's like, you know,
Which
it'd be
was the one
boring
you-
if I got the exact consistency. for
Which was the
everyone else.
horn you did?
The red one there.
It's hard to see. There's the top. See
So
the-
these little cuts, you don't use your finger on them.
Yeah.
They're at the
I know,
end.
It's amazing. Yeah. But every time I've ever seen someone.
And then you almost always have these little teeth on the edge here. Funny little spots like that. But like I said, you go to Google image, type in roses hand painted, you won't see this. They'll look quite different. And it's like the formula was designed to be quick but effective.
I gave you a horn once, I think, and it was rusty. And you taped, I think, over the flowers or something?
Yeah, there's different ways of masking. I found one of the best.
Flowers, painted the background, took the mask off, and then painted the flowers, and there were some flowers here, but it was distorted here. And so in the end, it was all like complete. So there's like 4 or 5 flowers on this side that were original, 4 or 5 flowers on this side that were repainted, and the background, I think all the rest was gone. I couldn't believe it. It was crazy good.
I've developed a new technique for masking, because you want to save original decals, and of course, all the flowers, as much of the flowers. I used to use a liquid mask kit at the art store, but I found if you just take some tracing paper, trace out the shape you want to mask, and then put it in water, and then set it on the area, the water just grabs the area, and then you use whatever lacquer, spray lacquer, whatever. And then, because I found even with the masking, the professional masking solution, you could still pull decals off, you know, and you could still like one of the biggest problems people get into when they're trying to clean up a horn is they don't realize the original paint very often it's just like this powder that's being held on by gravity. And they'll wash it and there'll be this red river of water coming off the horn and they're destroying the horn. And one of the first things I do is you try to get a clear shellac or something to hold down that dust that's wanting to leave the horn. Yeah, washing horns.
So what causes that is age?
Yeah, just
Just the age and when paint starts to break down.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I also repair antique furniture. And I see a lot of it at the curb. It's like the original fish glues release because they turn into powder over time. And, you know, it's like they teach pretty much nothing about restoration of furniture in school. So it's like, if you know how to squirt wood glue out of a thing, it's like very often these things are easy to fix. But things break down. Those kind of things break down. The binding agents just break down.
And this is the original.
That's an original. I had to touch up the black because there's some bad scratches in it.
Yeah,
But those are original flowers in that.
How do you know they're original?
Yeah, maybe you did them last.
How would I?
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. They look like the ones you just did.
Yeah, maybe there's you know, another Steve Redmond out there who, you know, but
Well, I thought you could probably do a test of the paint and see what
Well, that said, it was pretty powdery and it has, the paint itself has what's called crazing in it. And crazing is the little cracks you get in paint that only comes over time.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, there were crazing in it. It's very powdery.
Well, the paint they would have back in the early 1800s or something would be entirely different paint than what we have be using now. So they
Yeah.
kind of aids the paint.
Yeah, I think one other way of telling if you're dealing with original flowers with original surfaces. I've never seen an original colored horn that doesn't have flaws and flakes somewhere. It's just they don't age. The original paint does not age.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I've yet to see a horn that's
And
a
it
dent
would
in
be-
it somewhere.
Each flower would be tiny but different.
Well, that's
It wouldn't
right.
be exactly the same.
Yeah, that's how you can be confident that if it's a Hawthorne and Chev horn, they're decals.
Yeah.
Because the bouquets are the exact same. There's no clumsy variations at all,
Yeah.
where you see all kinds of clumsy variations of these. But yeah, I wish Stan would at least say, you know, these are repaints. You know, if it's like any other market, it's like people kind of want originals. Repaints are okay. Like I find it strange that with the fireside horns, you can get reproductions of the fireside horns. But they're opaque. They're not, originally the fireside horn was a tint. But the ones you buy, the reproduction ones now are just opaques. Like they've taken spray paint and they've put it's not a maroon, it is a crimson. But it's, you know, for me, it's just, maybe I'm neurotic, it's just wrong.
There's no
But they're still expensive horns. People still pay big bucks for them.
there's no three-dimensional.
Well, they don't glow. When you get
Yeah,
the
they
nickel
don't-
plating come through,
yeah,
it's like
just tell-
the glow that you don't get from just spray paint. Like there's a few exceptions, like the standard phonograph company, it's a Columbia client machine, you know, the one with the weird spindle in the front. Those horns are in opaque red. But pretty much everyone else used tints in reds and blues. But
So that's great. I think we
okay,
covered-
I think that's, I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff I wanted to say, but I've forgotten. That's also how it goes on.
Another question too, now, can you take a horn like that, the paint is is dirty, like there's a film on it, and just clean it?
Oh, I know,
You
that's
have
the
to use
anxiety,
something-
because if you can easily disintegrate the original paint.
Yeah, well, that's what you were saying.
And
this is not-
I usually just, you know, I'll dust it. If I feel, oh, this is really, I'll dust it and then I'll get that shellac on top, but seal it in.
Or
It's
seal it.
better than have the original surface come off
Seal
when
it.
you're washing. Yeah, but that is a problem. You see a stain there. It's like, boy, do I want to chase that stain? You know,
Well, you know, something that I've learned a lot from watching refinishing and retouching shows on YouTube is that when you're wanting to do that, find an area of the horn, for example, that is totally out of view and test with it. I know that there's one guy tests different shellacs and different materials to remove the whatever by trying it on the actual canvas he's working on, but in areas that are really out of the way and can be redone easily. Just a suggestion.
no, that's a very good point. I try to do that all the time with things. Okay, on to the donuts.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation.
You're a true artist. I
I
suspect
think it's
for a job at a tea company, they wouldn't get hired right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both of our presenters. Fabulous. I think each one could have been a topic in itself. So we're gonna take a break now, short break as we normally do. I'd like to remind, we've got the 50-50 draw with Don Kelly. There he is.
As soon as I
get
a donut in, I think.
Right? And we've also got Scott filling in for Ed, who's filling in for Mike as auctioneer today. So we'll start the auction in probably about 15 minutes or so. So help yourself to some refreshments. We'll talk soon.